Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5th, Chapter 2, entitled The Activities of Maharaj Agnidhra. Text number 2. Sacha tradachit pitralotatramaha suravara vanita krida chaladronyam Bhadраvantam Visvasrijam Patim Aprita Paricharyo Patarana Atmaitradrayena Tapasya Aradayam Babuva. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Desiring to get a perfect son and become an inhabitant of Pitrloka, Maharaj Agnidhra once worshipped Lord Brahma, the master of those in charge of material creation. He went to a valley of Mandara hill, where the damsels of the heavenly planets come down to stroll. There he collected garden flowers and other necessary paraphernalia, and then engaged in severe austerities and worship. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The teen became Pitrloka Rama, or desiring of being transferred to the planet named Pitrloka. Pitrloka is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Vrita Devan Pitrin Yanti Pitruvrataha, Bhagavad Gita 9.25. To go to this planet, one needs very good sons, who can make offering to Lord Vishnu and then offer the remnants to their forefathers. The purpose of Shraddha ceremony is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, so that after pleasing Him, one may offer prasada to one's forefathers and in this way make them happy. The inhabitants of Pitrloka are generally men of the Karma Kandya or fruitive activities category, who have been transferred there because of their pious activities. They can stay there as long as their descendants offer them Vishnu Prasada. Everyone in heavenly planets, such as Pitrloka, however, must return to earth after exhausting the effects of his pious acts. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.21, Sine Punye Martyalokam Vishanti. Persons who perform pious acts are transferred to higher planets, but when the effects of their pious acts are over, they are again transferred to earth. Since Maharaj Priyavrata was a great devotee, how could he have begotten a son who desired to be transferred to Pitrloka? Lord Krishna says, Pitrin Yante Pitruvrataha. Persons who desire to go to Pitrloka are transferred there. Similarly, Yanti Madhyajino Apimam. Persons who desire to be transferred to the spiritual planets, Vaikuntha Lokas, can also go there. Since Maharaj Agnidhra was the son of a Vaishnava, he should have desired to be transferred to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha Loka. Why then did he desire to be transferred to Pitrloka? In answer to this, Goswami Giridhar, one of the Bhagavatam commenters, remarks that Agnidhra was born when Maharaj Priyavrata was infatuated by lusty desires. This may be accepted as a fact because sons are begotten with different mentalities according to the time of their conception. According to the Vedic system, therefore, before a child is conceived, the Garbadhana samskara is performed. This ceremony molds the mentality of the father in such a way that when he plants his seed in the womb of his wife, he will beget a child whose mind will be completely saturated with a devotional attitude. At the present moment, however, there are no such Garbadhana samskaras, and therefore people generally have a lusty attitude when they beget children. Especially in this age of Kali, there are no Garbadhana ceremonies. Everyone enjoys sex with his wife like a cat or dog. Therefore, according to Shastric injunction, almost all the people of this age belong to the Sudra category. Of course, although Maharaj Agnidhra had a desire to be transferred to Pitrloka, this does not mean that his mentality was that of a Sudra. He was a Satriya. Maharaj Agnidhra desired to be transferred to Pitrloka, and therefore he needed a wife, because anyone desiring to be transferred to Pitrloka must leave behind a good son to offer yearly pinda or prasada from Lord Vishnu. To have a good son, Maharaj Agnidhra wanted a wife from a family of demigods. Therefore, he went to Mandara hill, where the women of the demigods generally come to worship Lord Brahma. In Bhagavad Gita 4.12, it is said, Transanta Karmanam Siddhim Yajanta Iha Devata. Materialistic who want quick result in the material world worship demigods. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, Shri Aishwarya Prajespataha. Those who desire beautiful wives, substantial wealth, and many sons worship the demigods. But an intelligent devotee, instead of being entangled by the happiness of this material world in the form of a beautiful wife, material opulence, and children, desire to be immediately transferred back home, back to Godhead. Thus he worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport.
So we are reading in this chapter the activities of the son of Maharaj Priyavrata, Maharaj Agnidhra. And in today's verse, the verse describes about Maharaj Agnidhra. Once upon a time, sacha kadachit, at some time, once upon a time, Pitrloka kamaha, he desired to go to Pitrloka. So once upon a time, he desired to go to Pitrloka. Once upon a time, he, desiring to go to Pitrloka, what did he do? Suravara vanita krida achala dronyam. Achala dronyam. Achala means something that doesn't move. It means the mountain, the hills. And dronyam means a valley. So, achala dronyam, there are mountains, and between the mountains there is a valley. There, Suravara Vanita. Vanita means a woman. Suravara, important devatas, Sura. Suravara Vanita Akrida. These heavenly women, they come for sports, to play, to have a stroll, to walk around. Suravara Vanita Akrida Achala Dronyam. There, Bhagavantam, very powerful, Vishwasrajam Patim. Vishwasrajam, those who are Vishwa, universe, Srajam, creation, Patim, and the Lord of the material creation, are those who are involved in the material creation and their Lord, and who is very powerful. And that's referring to Lord Brahma. Bhagavantam Vishwasrajam Patim Abhrita paricharyopakarana. Abritha, he gathered, he collected. Who? Agnidhra collected. Agnidhra, Abritha, paricharya, to worship. Upakarana, you need various paraphernalia for worship. So like the garden flowers and other paraphernalia, he abritha, he gathered. Paricharya upakarana, paraphernalia for worship. Atmaikagriyena, with one pointed mind. Atma ekagriyena, tapasvi, practicing austerities. Aradhyam, worship of Vishwasrajam Patim, Lord Brahma. Babhuva, he became engaged, he performed. Desiring to get a perfect son and become an inhabitant of Pitrloka. Pitrloka Kamaha. Maharaj Agnidhra Saha once Sahachakadachit once worshipped Lord Brahma. Aradhyam Babhuva Bhagavantam Vishwasrujam Patim Aradhyam Babhuva. Once worshipped Lord Brahma, the master of those in charge of material creation. Vishwasrujam Patim Aradhyam. He went to a valley of Mandara hill, Achaladronyam, where the damsels of the heavenly planets, Suravara Vanita, come down to stroll, Akrida. There he collected, Abritha, garden flowers and other necessary paraphernalia, Paricharyopakarana, and then engaged in severe austerities, Tapasvi, and worship, Aradhyam, engaged in severe austerities, Atmaikagrena Tapasvi Aradhyam Babhuva, worship, also engaged in severe austerities and worship. So, in the verse and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada brings out some very interesting points. First of all, Prabhupada is talking about Pitrloka Kamaha. What is this Pitrloka? And what was this desire that Maharaj Agnidhra had developed? And Prabhupada is giving reference in the Bhagavad Gita, where there is reference to Pitrloka. Pitrloka, where the forefathers live. It is one of the heavenly planets, one of the Swargaloka. And there the quality of enjoyment is very high. Like we see in this material world also, there are different qualities of enjoyment. Some people live in slums in our country, but they have some enjoyment there. Some people live in mansions. There is an enjoyment there. So you see there are gradations. In the same way, in the heavenly planets, there is another very high quality of enjoyment. And so Maharaj Agnidhra became Pitrloka Kamaha. He desired, let me go there. Pitrloka. He developed there. Sacha kadachit Pitrloka Kamaha. He desired to go to Pitrloka. So Prabhupada is pointing out, how does that happen? For one to go to Pitrloka, one must have pious activities, one pious credits, punya. Punya credit must be there, substantial punya credit. If we don't have substantial punya credit, we'll be born in the slum, where you'll have one quality of enjoyment. So if one has good punya, that will propel them to go to higher and higher planets and heavenly planets like Pitrloka. And there to sustain there should be constant fueling of of punya. And that, if one has a son, if one has left behind a good son in this world, and he is doing shraddha every year, and he gets a little punya from that, and he gets to stay there in Pitrloka and enjoy life. This is the idea. And so, if one has to remain there, one has to have a son who will do shraddha time after time after time. So this is the Vedic practice. It's available, it's familiar. We are all familiar as Hindus, these kind of practices. There is a Pitrupaksha. There is one time when there is Pitrupaksha, where a lot of people want to do something for their forefathers, and they do some worship at some point, sometime during the year. So all of these, Prabhupada is pointing out, are what is known as karma kandiya activities. This is another very important perspective that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brings. And he explains these in his instructions to Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. And in those Rupa Sanatana Shiksha, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, these things come, and Srila Prabhupada has made them available in English language for us to understand. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says there are primarily 3 sections in the Vedas. One is the Karma Kanda, another is the Jnana Kanda, and the third is the Upasana Kanda. What happens? The Vedic knowledge is very vast. You take a Upanishad and you start reading, one will get bewildered. What is being mentioned there? What is being written there? And then you read the Puranas, you will get one kind of. So, these vast literatures, what are they conveying? Sometimes when somebody reads all of this, one gets a feeling that it is some complicated knowledge. But Srila Prabhupada points out that it is not some complex ideas which don't match with each other, contradict each other. But Srila Prabhupada says that no, from all of these Vedic literatures, you get a cogent, a coherent, a consistent philosophy. And not just a philosophy. A philosophy means something, fanciful thinking and imagination. No. It's a philosophy that can explain the creation, this world, and the inhabitants of this world, why these activities happen, why all these things are there. A very cogent, consistent, very coherent explanation of the world. This is one of the beauties of Srila Prabhupada's presentation. And for Srila Prabhupada to present this in simple, understandable English language, understandable by everyone in the world, became possible because of various efforts of the previous Acharyas. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his own guru. One of the important contributions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was because many places in the Vedic literatures there is reference to parampara. Evam parampara praptham imam rajarshayo viduhu. Gita says that. This knowledge is received in a parampara. But generally, what is this parampara succession of teachers, preceptors, teachers? And then if you see history, if you see the Vedic literatures, if you see history of Vedic India or the ancient India, you will find so many gurus, so many places, so many sages. How do they all fit in? One of the important contributions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was he penned down, this is the disciplic succession that we are coming from. Beginning from Krishna to Brahma to Narada to Vyasa, and then the different Acharyas. Then comes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fits in, and how all others, and how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came, who his guru was, and his guru. A very, very clear delineation of the parampara, in which this knowledge has been carefully preserved and passed on. And that's why Srila Prabhupada, many times in his literatures, in his talks, in his teachings, he refers to parampara and points out, like in the beginning of at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says, this Bhagavad Gita as it is received in the following disciplic succession. Evam parampara praptham. So this is one of the brilliant things that Srila Prabhupada did. And for Prabhupada to do that, put it so succinctly, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had delineated this. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur realized Acharya, pure devotee. He studied various paramparas, especially of the Madhva parampara. He has written one of the books where he gathers, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur traveled everywhere in India, must have traveled to Udupi also, gathered from the different mutts, all their successive acharyas. He writes them from Madhvacharya till 1920 or 1930 when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was writing these. Who are all the Mathadipatis? For different mathas, he lists them and he compiles them. You know, the research that he had done. And then finally arrives at this parampara and he declares that. And when he declares that, there is a huge uproar among the sadhus in Bengal and in Vrindavan. How is it? He has declared like this. Some people were not probably in the parampara listed there. They've got affected that, oh, we got left out. Our chain got left out. And maybe whatever those reasons are. There was an uproar. There was an opposition for that parampara delineation. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur strongly defended that this is our parampara. This is the way Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message has come. So like this, there were many important contributors of systematization of this entire corpus of Vedic knowledge. Another important contributor was his own father, Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Because Bhaktivedanta Thakur, what happens? Krishna talks about Sakalena Mahata Yogo Nashta Parantapa. This knowledge is coming down in this parampara, but in due course of time, Yoga Nashta happens. That connection gets lost. That flow of the knowledge gets lost in time. That's nature of human society. We, create some new ideas, new concoctions, and that way the pure knowledge that is coming down gets misunderstood. So that happens time and again, and Acharya has to come and set it right. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur, when he appeared, Chaitanya's philosophy was by and large misunderstood. And so once again he cleared up the mess and he said, all these are wrong followers of Chaitanya. These are the true followers of Chaitanya. So like this, from time to time, bringing in clarity was essential. And if you trace that behind a few generations, during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, it was Chaitanya also who was engaged in this kind of bringing clarity about Vedic knowledge 500 years ago. So there were so many Acharyas. Shankara had his view, Ramanuja had his view, Madhva had his view, Nimbar. And if you read carefully, sometimes there is difference between the Acharyas' understanding. And so there will be confusion among people. Of course, that knowledge exchange was not so much 500 years ago because there was no travel was complex. You know, somebody desires to go to Vrindavan, somebody desires to go to Kashi, somebody desires to go to Rameshwaram. They can make it once in their lifetime. Right? And here there are many devotees. 10-year-old devotee would have gone to Vrindavan 5 times. Right? So now it is different because movement of people itself was a challenge 500 years ago. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to travel all over India, it took about 2 years for him traveling in South India. So the knowledge exchange was not so prevalent, but still Acharyas would travel. Madhvacharya traveled from Udupi all the way up to Badrikashrama. Even Ramanujacharya traveled, Shankara traveled Haridwar. So Shankaracharya traveled to Nepal. If you go to Kathmandu, there is one temple, and there is a place where there is a statue, there is a deity of Shankaracharya with 4 of his principal disciples there. So they say that Shankaracharya came to this temple thousands of years ago. So our Acharyas, they would travel to teach a system of knowledge and understanding that they had developed. So this is how it was. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu 500 years ago, it's very significant. He is Lord Krishna himself, who knows the final conclusions. And so he was communicating this to his important disciples, Rupa and Sanatana. He was teaching this to Rupa on the banks of Triveni Sangama in Prayag, and he was teaching Sanatan Goswami on the banks of Ganga in Varanasi. So this, in those teachings, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had identified Rupa, Sanatana, one of the important disciples, and their duty was to write this knowledge systematically. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was imparting. So in those instructions, he says, so much of Vedic literature are there. Don't get confused. You can broadly categorize into 1, 2, 3, Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda. This is how you must understand. Because this kind of systematization, this kind of classification, this kind of perspectives are important to understand what are the Vedic literatures talking about. And these people who bring this kind of clarity, addressing the ignorance that is prevalent at that time, they are known as Acharyas. They come to be known as Acharyas. They come at some climactic moments in the history of humanity, dispelling ignorance, bringing back the right conclusion. And Srila Prabhupada is one such Acharya. And what Srila Prabhupada does, we see that here in the purport, in today's purport. Today from time to time, there are different kinds of ignorance sets in the human society. And that becomes deeply, and that population at that time, they are convinced about that perspective, ignorance. And that ignorant perspectives, and they lead their life and they go about very confidently, and there'll be stalwarts among them, they'll be called philosophers, thought leaders, and they'll come up with these different ideas and influence the rest of the people, and rest of the people follow them. But it's only another one aspect of ignorance that happens, like it's happening today in our modern society. There is an ignorant understanding of the world and life. Everyone is thinking, this life, when I have this body, we must enjoy. And that's it. I remember when I was a small boy in school, or probably I was in school, I think. Maybe 11th standard, PUC or something. My mother used to send me to one restaurant, it's here, not very far from here, and to buy some idli. You know, once in a way you pack some idli and come home. So I would go. Suddenly I remembered this a few days back for some reason. And so when I go to the restaurant, it was a vegetarian restaurant, and there would be one man, one young fellow, and he would meet me and talk to me, because I would go by 4 o'clock, right, for the evening, to bring something from the restaurant. So I would go by 4, 4:30, 5 o'clock, around that time. It's not peak time. So this young fellow would meet me. He was older than me. He was working there. Must have been in his 20s, 25, like that. Under 25, I would think, as I remember. He would meet me, and when the idli is getting packed, and he would talk to me. And he would tell me, life is short, make it sweet. and this fellow, maybe at least a dozen times I would have gone, as I remember. Every time he would tell that. Life is short, make it sweet. And what he would be doing, he would be chasing young girls. Young fellow after all. And he would try to tell me those things. And I would hear something, and then talk to him a little bit and come away. So this is the idea of modern society. Life is short, make it sweet. Right? That's what everybody is thinking. We must maximize our enjoyment of the senses and make it sweet as possible. Because they know every now and then some bitter thing keeps coming. They have to keep struggling and shoo away and all that, and try to make it sweet as possible. And today, all scientific investigation, all technology, all research is towards making life sweeter. All public policies, economic policies, international diplomacy, international policies, everything, the basis is how to make life more enjoyable for the short term that we are here. This is the basis. This is another big ignorance, where people think that the short life is everything and we must maximize our enjoyment. And there are thought leaders, there are big philosophers, there are written books, huge books. And there are big organizations like the United Nations, world organizations, and world's big leaders come there and they discuss on what? On a system of understanding which is grounded solidly in ignorance. And these are all considered to be the thought leaders and philosophers and leaders in the society. Just see how this comes about. And that's what the world is thinking. So it becomes that ignorance becomes deeply entrenched in the society. It influences everyone's thinking, everyone's behavior. That's what has happened to us. And Srila Prabhupada is smashing that ignorance. And for this ignorance to come up, there is a systematic development of the ignorant system. Don't think that it is, because everybody is intelligent. So they have to get convinced. So they develop there is a systematic development, logical development of the ignorant philosophy. And that is happening through, in today's world, through our educational systems. So there is something known as a scientific temper. That's the hallmark of modern education. A scientific temper to question, to understand, to system. That is how we all have grown up like that. We have all become victims of that. But we pride that we have a scientific temper. And all of this scientific temper is for what? Understanding this material world and how to use this material world, different things, for maximizing our enjoyment to make this life sweet. And then we struggle and do all these things, and suddenly one day, bang, something called a phenomenon we have really not yet understood, but we will understand very soon and we will conquer that. Don't worry, this is the assurance that the system of ignorance gives, and something called death happens, and we don't know what it is. What happened to that person? Gone. We lament, oh, he's gone. And then afterwards we get back to our business as usual. Let me go on with my maximizing my enjoyment. So look at the ignorance that is deeply entrenched. And we pride that we are very, very systematic in our thinking. We are very logical in our thinking. We have a scientific temper. And Srila Prabhupada is smashing this ignorance in order to establish the supremacy of Vedic knowledge. So we always come up with this, why this, why that? And in Hindu India, if you see, Hinduism, we have so many practices. Religiously, culturally, it is part of our lives. That's what happens with religion. Religion, especially Hindu religion, it's a wonderful thing actually. It brings about profound philosophical concepts and practices which will benefit the soul in the form of a day-to-day activity of the person, and that's known as religion. Sometimes this question about difference between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is the core of all religion, definitely of Hinduism. And religion is how to convert that spirituality and bring it into day-to-day access of common people. Like for instance, everybody goes through something known as a marriage. Or most people, not all of you. Most people go through something known as a marriage. How to bring spiritual principles into marriage. There is a ceremony, there is a ritual. All of those things somehow to bring the soul some spiritual awareness, spiritual understanding. It's connected with that. A child is born, a childbirth happens, very common, and we are all result of that. So when a child is born, there is a namakarana, jatakarana. When the child is born, what happens? Some spiritual activity, some activity connected with that, where the family comes together. There is some worship of Krishna, worship of Vishnu. In that way, they get connected with some spirituality. So this is what religion does. And we as Hindus, most of us who are born as Hindus, we all got exposed to those things. And now, all these religious practices that are there in the part of our family exist. And now when we go to school and college, we are getting educated about scientific temper, logical thinking, rationality and all. And now, at some point of our time, we start questioning, why this, why that? And when we don't get an answer, we think that this all, olden days, some people, they used to have all these ideas. It has no sense. Srila Prabhupada is addressing this kind of an ignorant system, and providing what is the true Vedic perspective. So when we read Vedic literatures, we get these kind of questions. There is or when we hear about, when we are surrounded by our practices, there is something known as Shraddha. What is this Shraddha? We have to do that for our forefathers. How does that work? What happens when you do Shraddha? My father is gone, my grandfather is gone, and I'm doing something with the priest. What do I do there? We need clarity. Srila Prabhupada is providing that clarity. Krishna explains, Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvalok. I am the enjoyer. I am all yajna tapasam bhoktaram. Any yajna, any tapasya that is described in the Vedic literature, it is meant to please Krishna. This is Bhagavad Gita statement. So Shraddha is also one of the yajna tapasa. It is meant to please Krishna, Vishnu. So then what happens? So Prabhupada is giving the Shraddha ceremony is an opportunity to perform. The core of Shraddha ceremony, the essence of Shraddha ceremony, what is it? You prepare some food and offer it to Vishnu, and that prasadam on that particular day of departure of the father or the grandfather or the forefather, whoever, by chanting some Vedic mantras, by a mystical process, you reach that prasadam to the forefathers. And when the forefathers get that one, because Vishnu Prasada they got, their pious credits will go up. And hence, if they are in Pitrloka or wherever they are, or if they are in difficulty, when they get Vishnu Prasadam, that will offset some of the sinful reactions maybe they are going through, or if they are in Pitrloka, it will enhance, continue to enable them to sustain their stay in Pitrloka. All of this happens. Similarly connected with this, we are talking about Agnidhra, son of Priyavrata, and the whole chapter last time, the previous chapter, we read how Agnidhra, Priyavrata was a great devotee, celebrated in the universe, celebrated in the Vedic literature. And he had a son, and his son was Pitrloka Kamaha. What happened? Because Prabhupada is explaining the system of philosophy, and he is teaching devotees, the 11 years that Srila Prabhupada had established ISKCON. And he was telling them that we should all become devotees, and we should make our children devotees. Now a question will come. Priyavrata didn't have this thought, is it? I should make my son a devotee. Because he was also a devotee, a celebrated devotee. This is how our logical mind thinks. And then we get confused if we don't get an answer. So Prabhupada is saying, no. It is so. But there was a phase of Maharaj Priyavrata's life, according to the order of his father, grandfather, Lord Brahma. He was engaging in the activities as an emperor. And so he had a queen. And he was infatuated with her beauty. And he was having a child at that time. And hence, that was his mindset. And because in that mindset he had a son, and that son became Agnidhra, who was Pitrloka Kamaha. See, you need these connections and the explanation. And for doing that, Srila Prabhupada is quoting that so-and-so Bhagavatam commentator, Goswami, Giridhara has said like this. This is the reason why Agnidhra had this kind of a nature. And from there, Prabhupada is saying that there is something known as the Garbadhana Samskara, which molds the mentality of the father. Because according to the mentality of the father, a soul is selected from the universe, and that soul enters the semen and enters into the mother's womb, wife's womb, and a child develops. How all of these things are. So Srila Prabhupada is presenting, because you are all used to logic and systematic thinking and scientific temper, a Vedic logic, a Vedic philosophy, how it can be understood in a framework of logic and scientific temper that we are all being taught and educated. This is one of the important contributions that Srila Prabhupada has made, how to address the contemporary ignorance in the human society and present Vedic conclusions to come to a point of appreciating these things. So, Prabhupada's explanation is there about Garbadhana Samskara. And then there is more things about pure devotion. We don't have time. We will stop here. And these are the glories of Srila Prabhupada's presentations. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki